former religious upbringing and beliefs always supposed to be present, even as a child, with nuns and priests, and look up to and kiss the ring and bow and your holiness and excellence. And what this is basically telling me is the equality of everybody, and there are no levels of awe other than one person that I personally hold in that position, which is God.
Let me ask some of the folks that have been doing the course a while something that may bring us together. How many sons does God have?
One.
All of us.
All of us.
One.
Yeah.
So, it's all of us?
All of us. One.
Well, how is that possible? Because we appear to be many.
One in spirit.
Not in form.
Could you say that again, and then he's going to tandem on to that?
One in spirit.
Not in form.
Are we blowing your mind yet?
Yes.
I want to say something about awe.
Sure.
Sometimes awe, getting back to kind of tagging on to what you said, can make you can feel fear. Can put you in fear of that person. You feel that maybe they're so much greater or so much better until you're fearful.
Well, that's true.
So, and I interpret this as Jesus saying that there's no reason for that because we're all the same. Tagging on, we're one in spirit and not in form. So there's no reason to put anybody on any type of pedestal for any reason because we're one in spirit, not in form.
And so I think the only place there's a difference is Rachel is saying there are some occasions where you can put someone on a pedestal and then not be fearful.
Now that you're saying it, I read it wrong. Equals should not be in awe of one another.
Yes.
And who are the... Go ahead, I'm listening.
Because awe implies inequality or an egotistic viewpoint.
No. See, my old church taught me that Jesus was the Savior of the world and that my goal and aspiration was to follow Jesus. And in the Course in Miracles by Jesus, Jesus says in lesson 61, he says, Jim, you are the light of the world. I remember the first time I read that. Right? I am the light of the world. I didn't know you're not talking about me. I know you. Yeah, Jim, you. Why must that be so? How many sons does God have?
One.
Not in form. Well, that's also taught in the Bible too, but it's not taught that way.
That is correct, Matthew. Okay? So, awe, have you ever, one of the popular things from the Bible is where Jesus says, you can do all the things that I can do and more. And yet all the traditional teaching to me put Jesus way up here and I'm this filthy, miserable sinner trying to be saved by this Jesus and
Ego.
Oh, yeah, I know, but you had a question before that, right? And is our ego, whatever okay.
That's an inside joke.
Thank you, sir. But the whole thing that's so radical in this passage is that Jesus says equals should not be in awe of each other because our awe implies inequality. There's nothing about me that is not the same for you. As a matter of fact, I am you and you are me. And the simple example is this. When you go and get in your car, are you a car? So, what I am seems to be caught up inside this container. And a lot of spirituality says we're not bodies, we're spirits. You ever heard that? Don't say ego. Yes.
No.
You okay, Chuck? Yeah. You got it.
You threw me for a loop when you said That's a clue. I can't remember last year or this spring when I was here for the first time. I had been in the program maybe 6 months at that time. And I read this then and I gave it 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. I read it now and I give it a 10, and I'd like to still hear more about it.
Thank you.
It's something. The whole basis of this reading is the fact that we are one with God. Every one of us together is one being. If you believe that, it's a number 10, and it's also, yes, you'd like to hear more about it. I can't give it to anybody. You have to read it and believe it yourself, and when you do, you'll be putting down 10 and yes.
And it does sound incredible, but what I found in this book, as has everyone here, is if you give this writer a chance to explain why he's saying what he's saying, pretty soon this radical, incredible premise will start to make more sense than anything that the world has taught us made sense. Let's go to the next one. Was there another comment?
And that's kind of the thing. It's so much of our experiences have been what the world has taught us. That's why this seems so weird.
And
strange.
who's the metaphysical ruler of the world?
The ego.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, about 40 years ago, I read a book called Self Speaks.
Seth.
By,
Yeah, we got one
by
Jane
Jane
Roberts.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And today, after many years of studying the course, I've come to realize, and I like to say it often now, when I read the Course in Miracles, I know I'm talking to self. That's what I'm saying.
It resonates.
This is
that
God
way.
talking to me. I am the God listening.
You know, let's do one more example. I do want to move on. If I were to do like a circle, and there were these rays kind of coming off of it, and I said, well, what is this? And you say, that's the sun, right? Well, what are those things extending out from the sun?
Rainbow.
What would you call those?
Rainbow.
Now, I called it that for you because that's language that we've been taught to understand. Well, did it ever occur to you that this and those are all the sun? How many are following what I'm saying?
It's all one.
Let's say it another way. What has more power, the ocean or a drop in the ocean? Which one has more power?
One and the same.
Neither.
One and the same.
Neither. What?
One and the same.
No, I said the ocean or a drop in the ocean. And you said
They're one and the same.
there is no difference in their power. The only way that a drop in the ocean could lose its power is if you separated it from its organism, its whole. If we took a bucket of water out of the ocean and set it separate, it would tend to lose its power, its energy, its force, the ability to rise tides, and all that energy, that magnificent energy that appears to be flowing through our oceans. And yet, don't you see that every droplet that makes up that ocean carries the same, every part is a container of the whole, as long as you keep it as one entity. But when you start to split and separate off, you lose power. So when you read in A Course in Miracles in the workbook part 2, where Jesus starts answering questions like, what is forgiveness? What is salvation? What is the body? What is the Holy Spirit? When he says, what is the body? You act like you know what that is, like you've been studying. Spirit just said you know that one.
What is the
Am I
body?
putting you on the spot?
Not necessarily. It's just this fence. This can.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Jesus says the body is a fence that the Son of God has placed. The body is a fence that the Son of God imagines that he has placed around himself to separate himself from himself. The first self is spelled with a small s, and then the second self is spelled with a capital S. So the body is a fence that the Son of God imagines that he has placed around himself to make him think he's an individual. We were never created to be individuals, and no amount of rebellious wishing will make that so. Now, what rebellious wishing does, given our power as creators, is it will make things that look like what we wish for. But they will be caricatures and superficial. They will have no substance in reality, because you cannot wish outside the will of God and have it be real. Why must that be so? Because God is the author of all reality. He is the omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent ruler of the universe. All spirituality says that. So how can you wish for something that God says is one to be many? Where can that exist in truth? That's crazy. It makes no sense. And now we're starting to look at a crazy... How many of you have ever said this is a crazy world? You thought you were kidding. The reason it makes no sense is that it's split. It's trying to do things that can't be real. So, we're God's kids. We have enormous power, right? But what we don't obviously have is wisdom, because look at this Y'all too young for Frankenstein. Look at this crazy world that's been created.
Robert De Niro, 1994.
Yeah, that's right.
Great. We do have some historians here. Now, is it Pavlov?
Yes.
Did you do that? And we're looking at excerpt 2. If you could just read that and give us a kind of your assessment, your evaluation, please.
So I have an accent. I hope you can understand what I'm saying.
We'll give it a try. Plus, we got it here right in front of us.
You who believe that God's last judgment would condemn the world to hell along with you, accept this holy truth. God's judgment is the gift of the correction He bestows on all your errors, freeing you from them and all effects they have ever seen. To fear God's saving grace is but to fear complete release from suffering. Return to peace, security, and happiness in union with your own identity.
You going to read more?
This is God's final judgment. You are still my holy son, forever innocent, forever loving, and forever loved. As limitless as your Creator, and completely changeless, and forever pure. Therefore awaken and return to me. I am your Father, and you are my son.
And your evaluation of that in terms of how much you agree with the message presented?
Well, I give it 10 because I believe that It's just connection. But it's really hard for me to like translate it as Rachel was translating it and explain, because for some words I don't understand quite.
Okay.
You know, so I
Fair
have to
enough.
realize
Fair
that
enough.
really gonna translate like every single word what I don't get, because sometimes I think I'm gonna get it, but this is really important. Like some of the, you know, I have
But
to.
you
So,
gave it a 10 based on your understanding.
Yeah, because you know, it's about connection, and really is like we are God.
What?
We are God, and God is us.
What part
That's the last one.
particularly
Well, I
did
like-
you read that?
So, well, okay, so the way what I sense
This
is,
is great.
therefore awaken, return to me, I am your father and you are my son. To me that's unity. Okay, so there is no separation. That's it.
What about hell? My church said the good people will go to heaven and the bad people go to hell. Anybody go to any church where they seem to say that? I was like, oh, okay.
All the Catholics raise your hand.
Let me ask you this. We're going to relate everything back to maybe some of the simple premises. You're going to get tired of me saying this, but it's going to help me to link to something, to anchor to something that we all say we believe in. My old church used to teach me there's heaven and there's hell. My old church used to also teach me that God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. So if God is everywhere, don't you get the feeling hell is a place that God isn't? Is that the impression you got from your church? You'd be away from God and therefore subject to damnation and the devil and Satan would be hot like all the time? How can they say that and still say God is omnipresent?
Doesn't make sense.
If God is everywhere, where can hell be in truth? Okay. The other thing is that if God is love, then how can anybody be punished? If God is omnipotent, how can anybody be lost from the will of God? How can, it's a poor God that wouldn't control everyone and everything, so how can some people actually make up their minds and go and do outside the will of God and be real? I'm sorry, maybe I'm not getting it. Somebody help me understand how that's possible.
It isn't.
And if God is love, you never heard anybody say, spiritual writings don't say God is love and hate. They only say God is love. Therefore, if you're seeing something that's not love, how is that possible?
You're seeing wrong.
Unless you're making that stuff up. Amy says you're seeing wrong. You want to offer any background to that as well? You don't have to, I'm just...
What kind of background is there? There's love and there's love, and everything else is wrong.
And who is it that would have you to analyze that further?
There you go.
Do you see how reality isn't all that complicated?
Well, I have a question on that. So,
Sure.
you know, let's say you watch the news, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, in Detroit, you know, you have shootings daily or whatever. So,
Yes, we do.
I'm witnessing. I mean, I'm hearing this. I'm witnessing whatever on the news as I watch it. So, am I wrong, or is what you're saying is I'm wrong for witnessing that?
Well,
No, you're saying your
In a
ego
sense,
sees that.
you're tuning it in instead of tuning it out.
The shootings themselves are wrong, and they don't exist in reality.
I get that, but I mean, I'm still, you know, like I try not to ever watch the news.
well, I
Because it's so
understand.
bad.
There are a lot of us that are going through that.
But if you're witnessing something like that, or you're witnessing, I mean, I'm personally witnessing that, is that my ego?
Well,
And I
let's
know
give you some
that's bad.
examples, okay? Jeez, help me. Neo and
Matrix.
The Matrix. Did you see that movie? Do you know the premise that what he thought was reality was just a computer manipulation? Let's take that one and maybe we'll add to that, how about The Wizard of Oz? Dorothy thought sure she was in a world of tin men and lions and scarecrows that had all of these properties, and there were wizards and there were munchkins and all of that, right? But they said she was dreaming. She was really home in Kansas the whole time. But you couldn't really convince her of that while she was in the dream. So it's not that you're wrong. It's just that if God is life and God is all there is, where does that leave room for death? And if God is omniscient and smart and intelligent, unless God created death, which would be paradoxical because I'm creating my opposite, and I'm not crazy, I don't have a split mind. People here have split minds. Do you know anyone here that doesn't have a split mind? Do you know the medical word for split mind?
Crazy.
Schizo.
Well, it's not that medical, but we'll get there.
Schizo.
Schizo what? Schizo or schism means split. Friend refers to mind, and the suffix ia means condition of. Condition of split mind, schizophrenia. Do you know how it's categorized in the Behavioral Health Code book? It's a form of what?
Mental illness.
And more specifically, it's a form of insanity, where you have these multiple personalities and you split from one side to another side to another side. Well, you say, I'm not schizophrenic. Anytime what you think doesn't match up with what you do, isn't that a split? Huh? Anytime that you're happy today and sad by noon, isn't that a split? And then by 2 o'clock you're happy again, but something else happens at 4:30 and now you're fearful. And then tomorrow morning you start out halfway okay, but then something happens that makes you anxious. And then you find out that you were anxious because your kid didn't get to school on time, but you found out why, and so now you get revved up to get back into happiness again. And then something else happens at 2 o'clock because somebody pisses you off on the telephone, and now you're angry. How can you move from all of these emotions unless you have a split mind? How is it that conditions can move you from point A to point B? How many of you have ever said problems is the thing that drives us through our entire lives, from one problem to another? And all I'm trying to do is stay happy. But how come stuff always keeps happening to pull me down? And sometimes it pulls me down a long time, and sometimes it pulls me down, I can get up, but there's no certainty. I can be doing great. How about the millionaire? There's this guy that owned all of these timeshares out of Florida, West something or other, and he had this story. He was the largest timeshare owner in the world, and he was building the largest mansion in the United States. And 2008 came. You remember with the recession? He lost all of his holdings. And he didn't do anything. It was the external rug that got pulled out from under his corporation. So, one of the traits I think that you will admit here is that it's full of opposites. It's full of ups and downs. People come and go quickly here. People appear to die. People appear to be born. But if people appear to die, what does that do to scriptures that our traditional churches promote that says God only creates the eternal? How can the eternal die? I'm asking. If I got this wrong, please let me know.
Eternal can't.
Okay, so when you watch the news, what they're telling you is a lie.
You know?
You can have a nice talk about it, but at its base, it can't make sense because it's not true. There is no death. What does death say about God? I'm so sorry. Please
That's
say.
all right. You know, one of the lessons that we have is, you know, God's gift is vision. And when you think about the word television, it's telling you what the vision. It's one of the great differences, you know, because you buy into that, you know, and you live in that.
What would the news do without violence?
Close down.
Make something
Now,
up.
here's the other thing that we need to grasp, perhaps on a more practical basis, and we'll go to our third one and finish up. Every day that you watch the news and believe it, you're creating tomorrow's news. Why must that be true? Because whatever you think and believe, whatever enough people think and believe, they give this powerful energy to. We are God's kids. When's the last time you saw in the news that every thought you have manifests? We have on average 60,000 thoughts a day. Every single one of those thoughts has manifested somewhere in some form. Now, when's the last time somebody told you that truth on the 6 o'clock news? When's the last time said, you know, when you're as powerful as you are and not a filthy, miserable sinner and rags and all of that, when you're as powerful as you are, you got to be careful with your power. You can't just use it all willy-nilly and uninformed and like some little reckless child. You are co-creators with God. That's 180 degrees from what my old church taught me. I'm a filthy, miserable sinner saved by the grace of God. But where we just ended up, what was God's final judgment? There's nothing to discuss. You're my kids. I love you. It has no condition. Isn't that what you got out of that reading or no? Did any...
She got it without understanding all the words. It sounds to me like you found a spirit. You got it. You went with it and you got it.
Excellent. How about yourself? Good, sir.
That was pretty cool.
Good. Now, let me ask, are you those that are new, are you starting to see how radical this teaching is? Let's go to number 3. Okay, Carl? And if you could read and evaluate.
Remember how many times you thought you knew all the facts, the patient, you needed the judgment, and how wrong you were. Is there anyone who has not had this experience? Would you know how many times you merely thought you were right, without ever realizing you were wrong? Why would you choose such an arbitrary basis for decision making? Wisdom is not judgment. It is the relinquishment of judgment. Make them but one more judgment. It is this. There is someone with you whose judgment is perfect. He does know all the facts, past, present, and to come. He does know all the effects of his judgment on everyone and everything involved in any way. And he is wholly fair to everyone, for there is no distortion in his perception. Therefore, lay judgment down, not with the writ, but with the sign of gratitude. Now, are you free of burden so great that you could merely stagger and fall down beneath it? And it was for illusion, nothing more. Now can the teacher of God rise up and burden it and walk lightly on. Yet it is not only this that is his benefit. His sense of care is gone, for he has known. He has given it away, along with judgment.
Thank you, Carl.
You're welcome.
What were your evaluation?
I give it like I put 7, but now read it again, I would say 10.
How much do you agree? You gave it a 10?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
How about the next one? How similar is this message to your current religious or spiritual belief?
Ooh.
You didn't get that one yet? To do that one?
I did it. I put 7, but
Okay.
for my experience as a Catholic, I would say 5.
Well, okay, so that's kind of midway. And are you amenable to reading more information of this sort?
Yes, it is.
So, let me ask you a question. Didn't he say wisdom is the laying down of judgment? How come he didn't say wisdom is getting better judgment? Right? I mean, you see what I mean? Why didn't he say, well, we need to teach you to use better judgment? Why?
Because we don't know shit.
Okay, because we don't know shit. Now, let's expand on that. Why don't we know shit?
Our vision is very narrow.
Why would the vision be very narrow?
Because we've got this ego thing going.
And what does this ego thing do? What is it that the ego has done? Here, let me tell you so we can kind of move. Stay with the shit. Let me show you how powerful you are. How powerful we are. We made our ego out of a rebellious thought of individualism. Think about the nature of your ego. It's all for itself. It wants to preserve itself. It kind of likes other people, but mainly I got to survive myself. And in order, it's my survival, my family's survival, my distant relatives' survival, my block's survival, my community's survival, my basketball team's a winner, my football team always wins, my state, as long as my state survives. What about the Soviet states? I mean, you know, in the old Soviet Union. And are you concerned about people in the Czech Republic? Okay, that's interesting. Are you concerned about people in the Aborigine colonies in Australia?
Yes.
Are you, to what extent?
They said that they cannot be extinguished.
Huh. Well, the point I'm after is, yeah, we like these, but we create these gradients, these levels. And so, do you see how there's separate levels and separate categories? Okay? You love this kid, but probably in a different way than you love my kid. And vice versa, probably, right? So I want you to see the underpinnings of these attitudes, and there's nothing wrong with it, but what I'm trying to show you is where it's coming from. It's from this rebellious entity, and another sign is it's even made this fence called the body to help make this illusion true. You had a comment.
Yes. So, can
Yes.
I ask about this? Because to me, the way how I see it or understand is what difference there is between love. There is no difference between love. She cannot love this kid more than somebody else's kid or herself.
To us, that sounds impossible. It's
So
not.
That's what so there's no difference.
It's just that that has been the system that has been so ingrained for eons. Now here's the other thing metaphysically, how powerful we are. We have made an illusion of ourselves, but because it's not real, but let me show you how powerful it is. The ego that I made is so powerful that my ego has made me think that it made me.
You can go another step with that.
Please.
The other step is different nationalities and separation that we bought into when we're all one. Just because Chinese, Japanese, black and white, we're still all one, but that's the part of separation. That's what we believe. We're different. And we're not.
Didn't forget this. Coming back to that. Hold that thought. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to take Rachel. Okay, I want to put... Are you male or female?
Female. My twin brother's male.
Wait a minute. Let me ask you something. If everything is one, how can there be genders called male and female? Isn't that separation? Who is it that told you that separation was true?
The ego.
Because if you're not a body, but a spirit that the ego has made a container around, by the way, what do containers do again? Contain. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pail, and I'm going to take all of these powerful drops of ocean, and I'm going to say, this pail of ocean drop is now my own little ocean kingdom. This is my world. What happens to the ocean drops when you separate them from source?
They lose their time.
They evaporate.
They lose their power.
Isn't that the arrogance of the ego?
Of course. Now, why would the ego be so arrogant as to say, no, Jim, that's not true, even though everybody here can calmly say that if you remove the droplets from the source, they're going to lose power. But your ego will say, hell no, I don't care what you say, forget you, man. Why would your ego say that? Because it's insane. It's crazy. What's the first thing that told you it was crazy? Because it thought that it could have a will different than the will of God.